Hey guys, what's up? I hope you're all enjoying your evening. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to the NFL Week 15 DFS Slate Playbook video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Today is Saturday, December 18th, 2020, and we're talking NFL-specific DFS for this upcoming Sunday's main slate, both on DraftKings and FanDuel. This upcoming Sunday, December 19th. Main slate. And as always, we're going to talk quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, all the positions you care about for NFL DFS. We're going to talk Vegas lines, matchups, and essentially everything you need to know to get ready and prepared for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. So sit back, relax. Let's talk some NFL Week 15 DFS. This is No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel here. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. As always, thank you so much for finding your way here, tuning in. We're already in Week 15, which is absolutely crazy. Really only a couple of more weeks left of actual regular season DFS where we have some larger full game slates. Of course, we will talk playoffs. We'll get into that as we progress into the NFL playoffs here in the next couple of weeks. But overall, we're down to the last couple of weeks here, especially with what matters, right? After this week, you're going to start to see players get rested, teams as they approach and lock in spots, things can change. So we're kind of down to the last couple of weeks of some actual authentic DFS, full-blown, full slate DFS for NFL. So kind of sad in a way. It's pretty crazy how fast the season has gone by, and we've really had to keep up with all of the different things that have changed. And one thing that is changing right now as we get closer to the end of the season, you can see right here, we're talking a shortened slate for NFL Week 15. You have 11 total games for the main slate on Sunday, and that's largely due to the fact we still had a Thursday game, but we have two games right now. Actually, the first game is on. It's a Buffalo Bills game versus the Denver Broncos. So hopefully you're tuned into that game, enjoying that from either a DFS perspective or season-long playoff fantasy football perspective. But nonetheless, for the main slate, we're talking 11 total games. A little disappointing that we don't have 13 as normal, but nonetheless, we're going to deal with that and roll with it. We're going to talk always specifically here this upcoming Sunday's main slate, both on DraftKings and FanDuel. I'll talk pricing for both sites. I'll point out if there's a particular site that stands out to me in terms of a salary or something like that, but nonetheless, we will cover all of that. Several games, as I mentioned, are on right now this Saturday, and in general for weather for this weekend, we're now approaching the later December, January months, of course, where we're getting colder weather. Does that favor running games? It can in certain spots. We do have a lot of great spots this weekend for running backs in particular, but there are some dome games, indoor games. Some games are not in cold weather, but just something to keep in mind there that we do have as we approach the later part of the season, a lot of cold weather games. In terms of what's going on this weekend, and we will talk Vegas lines as always, we have some large gapping in implied team totals, and by that I mean we have some really low implied team totals from Vegas for certain teams, below 20, below 19, not really good numbers there. And on the flip side, we have some really high ones, several teams above 30 for an implied team total. So we'll talk all that here very shortly, but something I just wanted to point out in terms of the slate outlook. And then of course, in terms of quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, we're all over the place this weekend in my opinion. Solid mid-tier price quarterbacks are emerging in my opinion, but there are some guys I think you can pay up and should pay up for. We'll talk all of that for quarterbacks. We have some really elite spots for running backs, both elite running backs in elite spots, and then just a number of other guys that are priced mid-tier or lower that are in great spots. All of that will be covered. And then lastly here, I just want to mention there are some great values at wide receiver. We have some banged up receivers, some receivers in good spots, and then some other guys just kind of emerging from the very low salary mark. But nonetheless, that's kind of what we're looking at for a slate outlook. Moving on to the Vegas totals here, we won't spend too much time, but it's always a good idea, as always, to look at Vegas totals to try to get an idea of the landscape for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. Now, as always, I record these videos either Friday or Saturday. A lot of these numbers I'm pulling on Thursday. I'm building these videos out, so these things will change. Numbers will go up, team implied totals will go up, they will go down. Overall, it's something you want to look at, but keep in mind they do change a little bit. For the most part, this is accurate, but make sure you do check these as we get closer. They can be greatly influenced by weather, by player injuries, this season and COVID in particular. So all things you want to pay attention to. But some things I do want to point out: Baltimore, Tampa Bay, Indianapolis, Tennessee, Los Angeles Rams, and Arizona, all projected as very healthy high numbers. In particular, Baltimore, Tennessee, and Los Angeles Rams are all above 30 for an implied team total. So definitely teams you want to consider targeting stacks from, targeting players from, because points are projected to be scored from those teams. On the flip side, and this is what I was talking about from a gapping perspective, you can see here Dallas, Jacksonville, Atlanta, Washington, Houston, Detroit, Philadelphia, New York Jets, New England, and Miami, all projected below 22 in terms of an implied team total. But in particular, the New York Jets are they're projected less than 2 total touchdowns at 13.5. You have Washington under 20, Jacksonville under 18. Just all teams that, again, you can pick a player or two if you find a really good spot for them, but nonetheless, I would avoid stacking a lot of players from those teams in something to consider as we jump forward here. But let's actually start for this weekend at quarterback. As always, we're going to target 2 real guys here, in my opinion, that I think stand out. I mentioned there are a lot of guys, especially at the higher price point, whether it's Mahomes or Jackson, that do stand out, guys that I don't want to discourage you from playing. But in my opinion, when I'm building lineups this week, I'm building the best lineups, in my opinion, from a couple of these guys right here, and that's Tom Brady and Ryan Tannehill. Tom Brady stands out to me. He's on the road this week in Atlanta, $6,600 on DraftKings, a very, very nice mid-tier price for him on DraftKings. $7,900 on FanDuel. Again, playing on the road this weekend in a dome in Atlanta, 48.5 over-under, pretty good number there. And then Tampa Bay, they're favored by basically a touchdown, 6.5, depending on where you look, but they have a very good implied team total at 28.3. So those numbers do stand out to me. I think they matter when picking quarterbacks. It's not the end all, but something that does stand out for Tom Brady here. Now, a number of things I want to talk about for him. First of all, his price, right? Solid mid-tier price. I think he can easily exceed that $6,600 price tag on DraftKings. A little bit tougher on FanDuel, but nonetheless, I like him on both sites. In road games. So again, he's on the road here in Atlanta. It's been a fluctuating year for Tom Brady. When he's at home, it's not as good as when he's on the road. Naturally, we want to target quarterbacks on the road in close games. This guy's a favorite here. That does matter. But as I mentioned, in road games for Tom Brady, he's averaging 40 or more passing attempts per game. It's a very, very good number. It's a very high volume number from a passing perspective and opportunity perspective. So we know he's going to throw a lot when he's on the road here. In addition to that, Ronald Jones, the starting running back, is out this week. Leonard Fournette, obviously a really good running back, at least historically, a really good running back. He'll step into the role. Probably won't change much from that role's perspective, but Fournette is a great pass-catching back, and I believe with Jones out, a guy they are committed to and running the ball with, it's going to give a bump to the passing game. Brady may have to throw a little bit more here. We may see 45 attempts or more. Something I do really want to encourage you guys to look into there is just those couple of things there. Him on the road and how much he passes, and then in addition to that, Ronald Jones being out. Now, all of that said, he has elite passing weapons. We know he has Godwin, he has Gronk, he has Evans, he now has Antonio Brown. Fournette is a great pass-catching back. So he has all the weapons he needs, obviously, to succeed through the air. In addition to that, this is going to be the 3rd highest paced game. Again, more opportunity. We want to target from a quarterback, a stacking perspective, games where the ball is going to move a lot from both sides, right? This is going to be the 3rd highest, fastest paced game. It's an indoor game. Typically favors offenses, so something really good to look at there. And then in terms of the matchup, it's a really, really good matchup, of course. Atlanta allows the 3rd most passing yards per game to offenses. They also allow the 3rd highest completion rate, so they're basically allowing like 3/4 of passes to be completed against them. And then finally here, the last point, it's a great spot, a great matchup for a quarterback for Tom Brady, with Atlanta allowing the most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. So Tom Brady, one of my favorite quarterbacks on this particular slate, a guy I will be targeting heavily, stacking with all the guys he has available. Tom Brady, my number 1 guy to deliver to you guys in this video. Moving on here, I really did struggle with the second guy because I do like Mahomes, I do like Lamar Jackson, but again, trying to build lineups, I just was not fitting out lineups. The Mahomes, Tyreek Hill lineup is so unbelievably expensive. You can't fit Kelsey, and if you can, it's like nobody else on that team even matters. But nonetheless, guys that I'm typically going back to here include Ryan Tannehill. He is playing at home, a little bit of a bummer here. They are huge favorites. Again, another little bit of a bummer here. A lot of a different circumstance than Tom Brady. But nonetheless, Ryan Tannehill does stand out to me. He's $6,700 on DraftKings, $77 on FanDuel, playing at home versus Detroit. Huge 52.5 over-under in this game. And then Tennessee. 31.3 in terms of an implied team total. I believe that is going to remain and still is the highest weekly team total, so a lot of points projected for Tennessee this week. Now, I will talk right off the bat here, this is a really risky play, but it does have upside. In addition to that, I would only recommend this this Tannehill play if you do like the risk and you're willing to put it basically on the line here. I would not go 75% of your lineups Ryan Tannehill. This is a tournament GPP only play, but here is basically the end all with Ryan Tannehill. We know at this point, and it's not going to change, you're going to see Derrick Henry be the highest owned player on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Knowing that this guy is going to garnish 35, possibly even higher percent ownership, playing Ryan Tannehill and stacking the passing game of Tennessee is a great way to pivot off of that heavy ownership of Henry and basically leverage the field, right? If Henry basically has a basic game, and by basic game at his price tag, he has 80 yards, 100 yards, and a touchdown, you can still make do. If they put up 35 points and it's all through 3 touchdowns of Ryan Tannehill, you've just created such leverage on the field, in my opinion. It's worth it. It's worth a chance here. It's worth the risk here for Ryan Tannehill, who's been excellent, by the way. It's just typically the volume isn't there for Tannehill when they get ahead. So basically, we're hoping that someone like Detroit gets ahead maybe early, 7 or 14 points, puts the ball in Ryan Tannehill's position a little bit more here, and we get maybe 30 passing attempts out of him. But all that said, this is a pivot play off of the Henry ownership that is expected and likely will play out going into tomorrow. A couple of things, though. It's a good spot. Ryan Tannehill has been excellent all season long, really. When he has had to put it on the line and really pass a lot, he's been really good. We know A.J. Brown is an absolute monster. Chris Davis is emerging as an elite receiver. He has the weapons he needs from the passing perspective. But in addition to that, Detroit is actually, this is very surprising. Detroit's defense, by the way, is just garbage. Really, really bad. But they're actually better versus the run. Not great. They're not good versus the run. I'm not trying to say that. But they are better versus the run than they are the pass. Their secondary is graded 31st overall by Pro Football Focus. They have very little in terms of a pass rush, ranked 24th overall, and they're allowing the 9th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. So by no means is this a bad spot for a quarterback, a bad spot for Ryan Tannehill. It's actually an excellent top 10 spot for him, possibly even top 5 spot for him on the slate. But again, high team total, really, really big favorite, playing at home, Derrick Henry. We'll see how it plays out. This is kind of the idea here. We're going to pivot off of Henry a little bit and try to get some leverage on the field. Moving on to the running back position here, the two guys I do want to mention right off the bat are Alvin Kamara and Miles Sanders. Alvin Kamara is probably my favorite play on this entire DFS slate. I think he's going to get a little bit of ownership, no lie. We're going to see Derrick Henry get most of it. Alvin Kamara is going to be up there, but his price tag is just too low. $7,400 on DraftKings, $78 on FanDuel. He's playing at home versus Kansas City, 52.5 over-under. New Orleans is a underdog at home at +3 in the Dome, 24.3 as an implied team total. So not the best numbers in the world there from a running back perspective, but Alvin Kamara is obviously a different running back. In fact, it's good. When they go down a little bit, if they're going to trail, he gets a ton of dump offs. All those things favor Kamara more than any other back in the NFL. But in general, I think it's a great spot for him with Drew Brees returning and his price tag here on those sites. Alvin Kamara should not be this price. And with Drew Brees returning, this is likely the last time. Well, there's only a couple of weeks left in the season, but the last and the lowest you'll see Alvin Kamara's price moving forward. When Brees is in the lineup, which he's back this week, it boosts the usage of Alvin Kamara. You see 18 plus opportunities per game go to Alvin Kamara when Brees is in the lineup. Again, likely lowest price point for him for the rest of the season. And then in addition to that, if you're talking him versus Henry, you're saving quite literally $2,000 to $3,000 in salary off of Henry, and you're getting lower ownership for a guy that has just as much upside, possibly even more upside than Derrick Henry due to his involvement in the passing game. And it's a good spot finally here. Kansas City allowing the 3rd most yards per carry. Alvin Kamara gets only about 12 to 15 attempts on the ground, does do a lot of his damage obviously through the passing game, but still nonetheless, when he does get those handoffs and he does get carries, it's a great spot versus this defense giving up a lot of yards on the ground per carry to running backs. In addition to that, they're giving up the 12th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So all things considered, in a great spot for Alvin Kamara, really any running back versus Kansas City at home. But with the return of Brees, his price tag, his elite ceiling, Alvin Kamara, by far my favorite running back on this slate. Moving on to my second guy here, Miles Sanders. He's $6,900 on DraftKings, $68 on FanDuel, playing on the road this week in Arizona with a 49 over-under. Philadelphia is an underdog, a pretty big one here at +7 with a 21.3 implied team total. So those numbers are not ideal when selecting running backs, but I think Vegas has this a little bit wrong here. I'm not saying Philadelphia is a good team, but I think things are changing a little bit with Jalen Hurts, especially from a running game perspective. I'm not so worried about Miles Sanders as I would most running backs in this situation, given the fact that Jalen Hurts is now starting at quarterback. So let's back up for a second here. Let's look at week 14. We had a monster game from Miles Sanders with Jalen Hurts being in his first start, being in the lineup at quarterback. It's a better situation, as I mentioned, with Hurts at quarterback. In general, you can see here, the zone read offense is now fully in play with Hurts. Hurts had a great game running the ball. I don't know what the exact number was, but I believe it was like 75 or more yards on the ground for Jalen Hurts. Miles Sanders had a huge game, 150 yards on the ground. All those things considered, it's because of Jalen Hurts and what he brings to the table. I'm not saying Philadelphia is a great team with Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is going to lead them to a Super Bowl, but that dynamic zone read option just opens up so many things from a bad offensive perspective from what they've been doing all season long. It now becomes much better for Miles Sanders because of the threat that Jalen Hurts presents them. So we're going to take advantage of that here, even if he's on the road. Going back to week 14 again, played 81% of the snaps. So we know Miles Sanders is an elite spot from a snap percentage, from a usage percentage. It's just he has not gotten the opportunities throughout most of this year because of how bad that offense has been, how bad Carson Wentz has been. And in general, I do believe Miles Sanders is an elite back, a top 5 back, in my opinion, in the NFL from a talent perspective. Just been in a bad spot. Hopefully things, again, are opening up here. This is a GPP only, tournament style play only play here for Miles Sanders. Again, hoping that Jalen Hurts continues to open things up, open up opportunities for Miles Sanders with that zone read offensive boost. The offense-defensive line too. In general, I like to focus in on this number. It's plus 54% for Philadelphia this week, meaning they have a huge advantage from an O-line, D-line perspective. Arizona's defensive line is not very good. In fact, their rushing defense is not very good. You can see here they're ranked 30th by Pro Football Focus. In addition to that, they're giving up 4.5 yards per carry on the season. That's 20th overall in the NFL, so basically bottom 10 in the league, and they're giving up the 13th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So I wouldn't say it's a cake spot for a running back, but Arizona is definitely a team that you can attack on the ground, and you should attack on the ground. And I believe from a Jalen Hurts, from a Philadelphia offensive perspective, that's exactly what Philadelphia should be doing and wants to be doing with their young rookie quarterback. Hopefully Miles Sanders in a good spot this week versus Arizona, gets a lot of openings because of that threat with Jalen Hurts. I like him as my second back here on the slate. Two other running backs I'll quickly cruise through here are J.K. Dobbins or Raheem Mostert. J.K. Dobbins stands out at $5,900 on DraftKings, also $5,900 on FanDuel, playing at home versus Jacksonville, 48 over under. Baltimore is a big favorite at -12 with a good 30.3 implied team total. Now, J.K. Dobbins is a guy that has not gotten a ton of opportunity this year, but over the last couple of weeks has seen his playing time increase, his usage increase, and essentially his snap counts increase. In week 14, you saw him play 62% of the snaps versus Cleveland. Really good number there. Again, we hope that gets to 70, 80%, but his price point, we can take that, and I think it's an elite spot versus Jacksonville this week. Again, I was really, and I still am considering Lamar Jackson. If I'm playing Lamar Jackson, I'm not playing Dobbins. But in general, because I left Lamar on, I want to go back here, and the reason I left Lamar off of my top 2 quarterbacks is because I favor that huge -12 spread that is in favor of Baltimore here, that huge implied team total. I think J.K. Dobbins has an opportunity to get, you can see here, 13 plus touches for the last 5 games. I really think that number goes 15 to 20 this week. You get an opportunity or 2 in the red zone. I think that he easily could pay off his salary on both sites. More specifically though, I mentioned 13 plus touches 4 of the last 5 games. In addition to that, he's had 11 red zone rushes over those last 5 games. Really good numbers there. Not only is he getting a majority of the touches, a majority of the carries, but he's also getting carries in the red zone, which is where it matters for a lot of these running backs. He's in terms of what he's behind in terms of that offensive line. It's the top graded run blocking team, or one of the top graded running blocking teams according to Pro Football Focus. You know Baltimore is just going to keep continuing to run the ball from basically every which way, every perspective they can. Baltimore is averaging 3.4 yards before contact on the season, so look at it that way. Well, I should say Jacksonville on the flip side from a defensive perspective, 4.6 yards per carry they're allowing, which is 26th overall in football. Pretty bad number there, bottom 5 in the league. So if Baltimore is allowing their running backs to go 3+ yards before they're even getting touched, Jacksonville's allowing basically 5 yards each time a running back touches the ball. It's a disaster from a Jacksonville perspective. It's a beautiful thing from a running back perspective. We're going to take advantage of that with J.K. Dobbins. Lastly here, Jacksonville, of course, they're trailing a lot in games. They're not playing very good. They're losing a lot of games. 5th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So I believe J.K. Dobbins, that whole running back situation is in a great spot this week, playing at home versus Jacksonville. But I do like J.K. Dobbins. Let's ride the wave here. Let's hope he continues to increase his playing time as they get closer to playoffs and get this guy, this young rookie, ready. The other guy I want to mention here is Raheem Mostert. There was question whether he would play this week, but all signs point to good to go. He mentioned that specifically. I made reference to that here. So he should be playing. He should be fully healthy for Week 15. He's $58 on DraftKings. He's $6,900 on FanDuel. Really good price there. Kind of that lower tier starting running back price tier that we like to target with a lot of our second and third running backs in our lineups. He's playing at Dallas with a 45 over-under in that game. San Francisco is a favorite at -3 with a 24 implied team total. He offers solid value, in my opinion, at that price tag. He typically is the bell cow outside of injury, and they have had a ton of injury at the running back position, San Francisco that is. But for the most part, Raheem Mostert is the stud lead back in that backfield. So we're hoping again that plays out this week. They're playing Dallas. It's an elite spot for running backs. Earlier this season, you wanted to target Dallas with quarterbacks with stacks through the air. But as of late, they're just really, really bad. They cannot defend the run. They cannot stop running backs. And so for that reason, we like Mostert. We like the San Francisco running backs here. And San Francisco themselves averaging 4.0 yards before contact. Again, go back to Baltimore. I said 3.4 was really good. This is even better. Basically 4 yards before these guys are even getting touched. So you know that they are in a great spot this week from an offensive line perspective. In addition to that O-line, D-line run blocking advantage just sits at plus 38%. Kind of plays into what exactly we just talked about. Dallas themselves, I mentioned they're really a good spot, a good matchup for running backs. Their rush defense is graded 27th overall by Pro Football Focus, bottom 5 in the league. They're allowing 5.1 yards per carry. That is dead last in the NFL. That is a horrific number. That is, you never have to throw the ball. Think about that. Every time you rush the ball against them, they're averaging 5 yards. Every 2 rushes is a first down. It's just a horrible number, so we want to take advantage of that, definitely. And then lastly here, all those numbers equal essentially 6th most fantasy points given up per game to the running back position. Switching over to the wide receiver position here, I want to start with Calvin Ridley. This play also relates directly to my Tom Brady play, basically the Tom Brady stack. Always like to come back with a wide receiver or a running back from the other team. In this case, I'm playing Calvin Ridley. $8,200 on DraftKings, $84 on FanDuel. It's a price tag that is hard to swallow in my opinion, but it is definitely worth it for Calvin Ridley. He's an elite receiver. With Jones in the lineup, without Jones in the lineup, it doesn't matter. Calvin Ridley is one of the best receivers in the NFL right now. He's young, and he's definitely a guy I want to come back against that Tom Brady Tampa Bay stack with. So, as I mentioned, playing Tampa Bay, Calvin Ridley is at home with Atlanta, 49 over-under. Atlanta is a home underdog at +6 with a 22.3 implied team total. Now, I mentioned Julio Jones in or out, doesn't really matter. Calvin Ridley still eats, but he's even better when Jones is, of course, out of that lineup. And Julio Jones is going to be out this week in Week 15. In terms of when he is out, when Julio Jones is out, Calvin Ridley is averaging 11 plus targets a game. If you go back to Week 14, it's a great example. He had 12 targets in Week 14. That's Calvin Ridley. So we know the targets go up slightly. It's a good little bump for Calvin Ridley, who doesn't really need it, but again, we'll take everything we can here. Julio Jones being out is a good thing for Calvin Ridley. The wide receiver quarterback matchup from Pro Football Focus suggests that Ridley is in a plus 32% advantage. Again, good number there we want to focus in on. Other stuff that just proves proves more of the same for Calvin Ridley, which is that he's an elite receiver. 24% team target share on the season. He's tied for the Slate high in terms of red zone targets with 22. That's tied with Tyreek Hill. Second on the slate with 40% of team air yards. So we know the ball's moving downfield to him, not just that stupid dink and dunk screen pass stuff that receivers often get. He's actually moving downfield with targets. He's top 5 in the NFL with a 2.36 yards per route run. And then Tampa Bay, the matchup here. Tampa Bay is really good at defending the run, but they're definitely susceptible to the pass, and they're winning games a lot. So you naturally see a lot of quarterbacks throwing for big numbers against them, receivers having good games. But overall, Tampa Bay is allowing the 12th most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. The other guy here, this guy is just a monster. When he is healthy, this is like the other DK Metcalf. This is A.J. Brown. He's insane, in my opinion. $7,600 on DraftKings, $8,300 on FanDuel. You look at those prices for A.J. Brown and you think, man, there's no way he should be, you should be paying that much money for A.J. Brown. But this guy has been consistently dominant when he's been healthy. And that's been over the last few games here. He's just basically been a monster. He can produce with very few targets. He has gotten 7, 8, or 9 targets per game. It's tough because he doesn't get 10 targets, doesn't get that double-digit target number that we want. But in general, this guy, if he gets the target, man, he comes down with it. He scores touchdowns. He has just been a monster. It's the stack with Tannehill. That's what I'm related to here. It's either Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, or both with Tannehill. In this case, my suggestion to you would be start with A.J. Brown. I think he's one of the best receivers in the league, definitely one of the best young receivers in the league. He has a huge matchup advantage here of plus 24%, according to Pro Football Focus. In addition to that, he's top 10 on the slate with a 33% team air yards. He's top 3 on the slate with 2.5 yards per route run. And then the matchup here, it's a really, really good matchup. It's the same thing I mentioned with Ryan Tannehill. Surprisingly, Detroit, I wouldn't even say surprisingly, they're just a bad defense, but everyone targets running backs against them. You can surprisingly target stacks against them. Detroit's secondary is graded 31st overall by Pro Football Focus. In addition to that, they're allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. So I definitely love A.J. Brown this week. I also like Corey Davis. Either way, both those guys, stack them with your Ryan Tannehill tournament play. Two other guys here, the first being Chris Godwin, and this is the guy I will be stacking mostly with Tom Brady, although Gronk's in play, Antonio Brown is in play, and Mike Evans, of course, is in play. But I want to start with Chris Godwin, $6,200 on DraftKings, $72 on FanDuel, playing on the road, all the things I mentioned with Tom Brady, all things excellent here. On the road in Atlanta, in a dome, 49 over, under. Tampa Bay is -6, so a pretty big favorite here with a 28.3 implied team total. Now his price has dropped. Week 14 we played him. He did not do very good. Well, we're going back to the well here. It's a great spot to get back on track. Again, they were at home last week. The numbers just aren't great for Tom Brady for some reason when he's at home. But when he's on the road and he's averaging 40+ passing attempts, everything gets elevated. Tom Brady gets elevated, his volume gets elevated, the wide receivers get elevated, the tight end gets elevated. In this case, we're going back to Chris Godwin here on the road. Indoor dome game, 3rd highest pace, fastest game. I mentioned that with Tom Brady. More volume, more opportunity when these high-paced games come into play. He has the single best wide receiver cornerback matchup on this slate at plus 58%. The last two guys I mentioned, they were in positive matchups, positive cornerback matchups, and this guy is nearly double them in terms of what Pro Football Focus is suggesting. So it's a good spot for him for sure. And then the Atlanta numbers, again, a defense you want to target against with wide receivers, with quarterbacks. 3rd in almost everything. 3rd most passing yards per game. 3rd highest completion rate per game, or completion rate in general. 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. All great numbers there. And the last thing, I pulled this out, week 12 of 2019, Chris Godwin destroyed Atlanta. Caught 7 balls of 8 targets, 184 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Let's hope we get that again this week at maybe some lower ownership. But this is definitely the guy I will be mostly stacking with Tom Brady. And then I always want to give you guys a little bit of a value here. And man, do we have value with the Saints players? You can go with Emmanuel Sanders, but you can go even cheaper here, in my opinion, with Traquan Smith. He is $3,200 on DraftKings, nearly bare minimum on DraftKings. The price is a little bit more on FanDuel, so if you want to consider Emmanuel Sanders, I think that's a little bit safer on FanDuel, but he's $5K on FanDuel. Playing at home versus Kansas City, it's going to be a great game in my opinion. The return of Drew Brees, 52.5 over-under. New Orleans is an underdog at home at +3 with a 24.3 implied team total. But Tre'Quan Smith, especially on DraftKings, is my favorite value play wide receiver, essentially because of that price and what little he has to do to pay off. The price salary is essentially hard to ignore with Michael Thomas now moving to IR, and that's why these guys are in play. That's why, even though they have low salaries, they are great values. Michael Thomas and all the targets that he gets with Drew Brees, even with Hill over the last couple of weeks, all gone. Michael Thomas is now moving to the IR, so it gives more opportunity, a bigger boost for players like Tre'Quan Smith. And then several games earlier this season, we did see Michael Thomas miss, and in those games, we've had some solid outings by Smith. Let's hope we get another one here. He has better usage when Drew Brees is in the lineup. Of course, every receiver for that team does. Moving from Hill to Brees is a huge bump for Smith and for the receivers of St. Louis. In terms of the matchup, it is positive at +13% with the Kansas City cornerback that he's projected to match up with. And then the game script overall, being an underdog at home in a dome, does favor the wide receivers, favors the passing game of New Orleans. Did I say St. Louis earlier? I think I did. Sorry about that. New Orleans. I don't know why I'm thinking St. Louis. There's not even a St. Louis team right now in the NFL. Sorry about that. So let's back up here. But the game script for New Orleans, the game script for the Saints does favor wide receivers, does favor the passing game. And then last here, in terms of the matchup, there's nothing special to point out, but Kansas City is basically middle of the pack versus the passing game. You've seen them basically destroy teams, lead teams, so a lot of teams do pass against them a lot. The numbers do fluctuate, but nonetheless, they're kind of middle of the pack in terms of grading and everything else for Kansas City and that defense. Tre'Quan Smith, though, my favorite value play, value receiver on DraftKings. You can also look at Emmanuel Sanders on FanDuel if you're going to bump up price a little bit there. But that finishes off the wide receivers that I like for Week 15. Moving on to our tight ends, two guys I do want to point out. Mark Andrews and Cole Kmet. Really drastically different price tags here, drastically different plays, but I'm going to give you both ends of the spectrum. Mark Andrews is by far one of the best plays almost all season this week at tight end, but definitely one of the best plays on this slate at tight end. $5,500 on DraftKings, $68 on FanDuel. He's playing at home versus Jacksonville, 48 over/under in Baltimore. Again, I talked about J.K. Dobbins, -12 favorites with a 30.3 implied team total. Now, I will not play Dobbins and Andrews in the same lineup, and I typically don't like giving two players, especially wide receiver, running back, from the same team, or tight end running back, whatever you would call it. But in this case, I think both are definitely guys you can play in your lineups, and it should be noted. So Andrews has reemerged as Lamar Jackson's favorite target, favorite weapon over the last 3 games. Of course, Andrews, due to essentially some complications and things with his health, has stayed away from the team with all of the different issues with COVID and everything that's gone on. So he is back. We saw him fully healthy in Week 14. He looked really solid. Again, we didn't see a lot of passing on Lamar Jackson, but when he does pass, it effectively goes to Mark Andrews. He's a big target. He's a big tight end. He gets a lot of red zone targets when Lamar's throwing the ball in the red zone. So we do like Lamar Jackson. We do like Mark Andrews here. We do like essentially that whole Baltimore team. The stats I want to focus in on: minimum of 9 targets or 78 yards over the last 3 games for Mark Andrews. That's a really good, solid floor for him. And all things considered, when you don't have a lot of tight end options, when you're really picking between Kelsey and Waller and players like that, there's not a lot of places to go. When you can get consistency and floors like what Mark Andrews gives you, you kind of have to take it. So that's the important thing here. Jacksonville in general has been shredded, absolutely shredded by top receiving options for effectively most of the season, but especially over the last month or so. And I'm not saying Marquise Brown won't do it, but what I'm saying is if you had to pick a guy, Mark Andrews is that top option, that top receiving option for Baltimore, so he would be the guy I'd go to. He should see lower ownership. I think the price point kind of favors either people bumping up to Kelsey or going lower to a cheaper guy, so I hope that Mark Andrews, as a result, sees lower ownership. And then it's a good matchup. Jacksonville is allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position, so I do really like Mark Andrews this week for Baltimore. The last guy I want to mention here is Cole Kmet. He's $3K on DraftKings. He's bare minimum on DraftKings. The price tag on FanDuel was $5,100. I don't know if I would go there. This is more of a DraftKings exclusive play, but he's on the road here in Minnesota with a 47 over/under. Chicago is an underdog at +3 with a 22 implied team total. Again, bare minimum draft or salary on DraftKings. You want to take advantage of that, and the guy has been playing. He offers insane value. If he gets 6 points, he just went 2x. So if he catches 2 balls for 40 yards or 3 catches, whatever he gets, and I think he definitely can exceed value here, it's gonna pay off. So 3K on DraftKings is what we are targeting here, and the role for him hasn't been great this season, but with Trubinsky has increased, especially over the last 2 games. Week 14, let's take that for example. Cole Kmet played nearly 90% of the snaps, and he's had 14 targets over the last 2 games. 7 in week 14 and 7 in week 13. So the guy's been getting targets. Again, if he can catch 5 of those targets, we can blow through the $3,000 salary on DraftKings. Red zone targets also are coming into play. He's had 1 in each of the last 3 games. Just more opportunity, again, blow through that salary. If he catches a touchdown, man, that's just icing on the cake. And over the last 2 games, I do want to mention here, 9 receptions on those 14 targets for 78 yards and 1 touchdown. Cole Kmet, if I'm going to pay down, he's the guy I'm paying for, especially on DraftKings. I think that price is just insanely low for a guy that's now getting opportunities and getting more usage in that Chicago offense. So that wraps up the core plays. Let's talk some other highlights here. As always, Lamar Jackson, quarterback. I've talked about him several times already. Of course, I will be getting exposure to him. Mitchell Trubinsky, though, is coming into a lot of my lineups. I wouldn't say a lot. He's on the verge of being in my lineups, I should say. I think he stands out. He's been playing pretty well over the last couple of games. Cole Kmet makes it an easy, stack with him, a cheap stack with him. You have Allen Robinson to go with him. Trubinsky has played well. I think he's playing for a lot. I'm not going to spend too much more time on him, but he is a guy, just to let you guys know, that I am considering getting into some of my lineups. Derrick Henry, I'm not telling you, please, I'm not telling you not to play Derrick Henry. He is in a smash spot. Just understand, with his price tag of nearly $10,000, you effectively need 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Can he get it? Absolutely. Has he been getting it? Yes, he has. But if he gets a 75-yard, 1-touchdown game, he really hurt you. It's hard to believe that, but he really did at that price tag. So I'm not saying don't play him. He's definitely playable, especially in cash games, but you need a lot for him to be worth it in tournaments. So I just want to mention that very quickly. Jonathan Taylor in a great spot. Has not had a great season, but over the last 2 or 3 games has really emerged finally as the guy that we've really wanted this season, the guy that we expected when Marlon Mack went down. Jonathan Taylor is in a smash spot this week. Definitely a guy worth considering. So is Cam Akers. We've seen him. It's just, do you believe in what you see? And you've seen him get a lot of carries over the last couple of weeks. But we've seen Anderson get a lot of carries. We've seen Brown get a lot of carries. We'll see how that plays out. It's definitely a little bit risky just from the play calling perspective, but Cam Akers, huge favorite at home this week for the Rams. Definitely a guy you want to consider. Leonard Fournette, a value play at running back. If I'm not playing Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette definitely comes into consideration as a value play at running back for my lineups. I mean, I mentioned Ronald Jones is out, so Leonard Fournette stands out. Allen Robinson, pair him with Trubinsky if you want. Don't pair him. He's been getting a lot of targets with Trubinsky, and they've actually been quality targets as of late. So definitely a guy you want to consider. Brandon Ayuk has been getting a massive amount of targets from Mullins. Definitely a guy you want to consider there. Same with Terry McLaurin, one of the best receivers in the NFL in my opinion. Top 10 at a minimum, maybe even top 5. Just has had a really bad quarterback situation, but he still gets it done, so he's definitely a guy you want to consider. So is Corey Davis. I talked about him a little bit already. Whether you play A.J. Brown or Corey Davis or both with Tannehill, I think you can go either way. Marvin Jones is a good comeback player. When I say comeback player, I mean against that Tannehill, Corey Davis, whatever you're playing for Tennessee. Marvin Jones is a guy that gets a lot of red zone targets. Galladay is out, has seen a lot of usage as of late. And then Travis Kelce. Of course, Travis Kelce is in play at tight end. He is just a monster. Somebody to consider for sure at the tight end position, should you be able to afford him. And so that really wraps it up. I know this video was a little bit longer than most, but we had to get through a lot. There was a lot of plays there to talk about. Hopefully you guys enjoy these videos. Hopefully they are helpful. As always, I want to quickly mention Daily Fantasy Nerd is the optimizer that I use, and I would not, hands down, would not be profiting this year. This has been a very, very profitable year from my perspective, from my personal DFS experience, and it's because of Daily Fantasy Nerd. They help me put these videos together. They give you the Vegas lines. I've showed them off basically in other videos. videos, but they give you Vegas lines, they give you your 150 lineup generations, they give you value plays, they let you sort through things, set your own numbers, whatever you want, matchups, plus matchups, negative matchups, quarterbacks, running back, whatever you want. Daily Fantasy Nerd has it. It's linked down in the description. You get a week free if you check it out. It does help support the channel. It is an affiliate link. Fully disclose that. We make no money on this channel from any of this content. So if you want to help out, please make sure, obviously, you subscribe to the channel, give these videos a like, but also check out Daily Fantasy Nerd. They'll be coming out with basketball here next week. They've been very good with basketball over the last couple of years also. So something worth considering. And that really wraps it up. Again, thank you guys as always for hanging in there to the end of this video. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports. It's the simplest, easiest way to help support the channel. It's my only ask of you guys. If you could just do me a favor, make sure you give these videos a like, share them, and make sure finally that you are subscribed. Also, I have a Twitter at NoHuddleFS. I post, I wouldn't say frequently there, but if there's updates or anything like that, I do post over on Twitter, so make sure you check it out there. Besides that, I wish you guys the best of luck in Week 15. Thank you guys again for tuning in here to the channel, to the video. Again, wish you guys the best of luck, and I will catch you in the next video.